This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by the Genesis Company, coming at you Tuesday afternoon. It's November 7th after the Wolves beat the Boston Celtics 114-109 in overtime on Monday night. Their fourth win in 6 games this season. They've now beaten the team that they've traded for Rudy Gobert in Utah. They beat the Eastern Conference champions from a year ago, Miami. They also beat the Western Conference champions and NBA champions, Denver. And then last night, they beat maybe this year's championship favorite, Boston. I think Kyle, you couple that with the fact that the Wolves are statistically the number one defense in the league right now, and what Ant was able to do offensively last night. It's hard to not kind of get swept up in this team right now. You're out of town over the weekend. We haven't even really had a chance to talk since even the Denver game. I mean, how swept up are you in this right now?
Well, as we were talking before this, I joke a lot during big wins or after big moments where it's like the Timberwolves saved my life. I had the most severe food poisoning I've ever had yesterday, so I watched all 4.5 quarters of that with my head just buried in a toilet. At one point, I think Ant stole the ball at the end of the first quarter and threw it from half court, and Michael Grady yelled, "Oh, and the heave," as I was just dry heaving all of my feelings and organs.
This is good. I hope everyone's still listening.
Yeah,
right now.
So if just down pretty bad, but they literally saved my Monday. So it's crazy, like you said there, just to the little winning streak they've been on. I think they're 4-0.
Right, like that's kind of like I think that's what's fueling some of this too. Is it's not the fact that they're 4-2. It feels to me like who they're beating and how they're beating them is kind of lighting a fire, right?
And they're doing it with the worst coach in the NBA, according to people in my mentions, which is always pretty impressive. So, yeah, I think they're 4-0 to start the season at home, which, again, just kind of you can dovetail that into a multitude of things. But I also just come back to, like, man, what if Target Center was, like, an awesome place for the home team to play in a terrible place?
It was lively last night.
You know what I mean? The fans deserve this more than anyone, and the team is actually really good. And there's still criticisms and players to kind of get into and things that they could do better. I mean,
that's what we've been saying. Like, that's a good thing. Like,
yeah, because it's 6 games into the fucking season.
I know, but I'm saying, like, if they, I mean, objectively, I don't think anybody out there is saying this is like a bad team. I don't think anybody's thinking this is a paper tiger defense, at least. Like, if that is the baseline, and we could go through like 5-6 things that not only we think could get better, but probably will get better. Like, sometimes skepticism is a way of, pointing to a higher ceiling. And that's just how I feel with this team.
And we, like I said, we didn't talk last week because I was out, but it goes back to like that Atlanta Hawks game. I know was one of the most frustrating losses that I can just ever remember. And this team has a lot of them, right? Like, that list is pretty long, but I just don't know how you as a person can know ball if you don't think that this stuff is like interconnected, right? Like, I always think back to the football thing is like when a team gets punked on a Sunday, like, it's always the smart bet to like take them the next week because they went all week watching film, getting made fun of on, local talk radio and national media. And there's like, they're itching to get back out there and like prove that, hey, we don't suck. And that Hawks game was terrible. But yeah, to want to fire Finch or blow up the roster after 3 games, like, I don't know. Do you think they beat the Nuggets as handily as they do if they don't drop that game to the Hawks? Like, sometimes, man, these athletes and these professional people, like, they learn things after a bad moment and it comes back. So, yeah, now you have that early blemish, which is a terrible blemish. And since then, they've probably played, I wouldn't say 12 awesome quarters, but I've watched all 3 of those games back 2 or 3 times. Like, they've played at least 10 quarters that are really good basketball. And last night, again, this is the 35th year of this team, and I can't think of 35 games where they played professional basketball for all 48 minutes, or last night 53. They never – I remember you used to talk about letting go of the rope. They never let go of the rope last night. Even when it got to, I think, 8 at one point. I think that was the biggest lead for the Celtics at one point. They just never really got flummoxed. Obviously, Karl had his moments, but they just played professional basketball, and I think they're playing professional basketball, they're winning games, they're beating good opponents, and I think it's a bright side or glass half full that there's so many things they could do better. That's a good thing. You don't want to peak in November, right? You want to peak in late April.
I want to start with Ant, but I think what's interesting. I was talking to Travis in the media room after the game about this last night. Is I think it was at the point when Boston had their biggest lead that Carl did have those 3 buckets in a row on that Drew Holiday switch. In the not switch, they were matching Holiday up with him. And I mean, we're going to talk about Carl later in this episode, but I wrote that down in my notes at the time that that was a meaningful shift in the game, and Carl played a bad game, but I don't know. I just thought that was kind of a weird pivot point in the game.
Wasn't it
got them to the fourth quarter?
Was it the Denver game or the Jazz game? Again, my brain is just mush right now. But the Denver game and the Jazz game, where Carl also had kind of a big third quarter where he strung together a couple buckets that kind of kept him going. Again, there's a lot of criticism. A lot of criticism that needs to go his way, and we will get into that. But I think you run it back up, and you just, what do you want to just take your shirts off? What do you want to do talking about Anthony Edwards? Because last night, I know I get hyperbolic on a lot of these pods, but postseason games will always matter more than regular season games. It's just a higher level of competition. But there's a pretty strong case to be made that last night was the best game of Anthony Edwards' career.
Oh yeah,
on both ends. It's not. I'm not even sure it's really up for debate. Not only the scoring, but the playmaking, and then two, just there was that one play against Tatum where he matched him up man to man at the top, and Tatum kind of lost the ball going left, and then it came a jump ball. I've never seen that kid who has such charisma and personality and is just always smiling. He looked like a Georgia Bulldog. He looked like he was just out for blood. When you throw the piranhas in the water, he was just kind of yapping at the ball with Tatum. What he did on both ends of the floor, and then just the shot making at the end of the game was impressive. And it was for 22 years old on that stage against that team, against those wings, best game he's ever played.
And with 5 fouls that whole time. Ant was asked about that after the game last night, playing with 5 fouls and guarding Tatum at that time.
Counting overtime, you had 13 minutes with 5 fouls out there. And yet you were still really aggressive scoring and pretty aggressive on defense.
Hell yeah.
What's your mindset on that? Do you edit yourself a little bit?
Hell no. They don't want to see me foul out. That's how I was looking at it. I'm telling Finchy, they foul me out, and that's on them. I feel like they don't want to see me foul out, so I still was playing aggressive.
Rudy said he's really proud of you for the defensive effort that you gave on Tatum. Just what kind of a challenge did you accept in those moments when he's sitting right in front of you? And it's
he got the stop on me at the end of the game, and he was talking smack at jump ball or overtime, and I told him coming again, and luckily he called me up for ISO and tried to ISO me, and I'm I play defense. I just got 5 fouls, you know what I'm saying? So I had to show him that I could play defense, but he's a great player, man, one of the best players in the league for sure.
Never forget, man. They compared that kid to Jordan Crawford and Deion Waiters. That's who they thought he was going to be, and he was perfect last night. I'll throw it back to you here. You can give me all the fun stats and stuff, but I also want to talk about leadership, because there was a moment last night in that game that I thought was, again, one of the most telling moments of this baton being passed and this kid elevating himself not just as a star player in the league, but a franchise player.
No, I mean, I don't have any crazy stats for you because I don't think that's what tells the story. I think it's 30, 38, 9, and 7. Is an awesome stat line. I don't even think it really tells a story. I think he quote only had 13 points in the fourth quarter in overtime, if I'm correct there. Felt like about 23, and I think the value in exceeding your stats is powerful, right? What that means is the game revolved around him. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, Boston dared him to be involved in the game on the defensive side of the floor as well, which as just an aside, I don't think that's how you try and go at Ant, is by just asking him to play isolation defense. I mean, I get it kind of with 5 fouls, but that happened right in front of me at the game. And I don't want to say I knew that was going to happen, but Ant's going to go chest to chest with Tatum there, and Tatum's going to make a difficult shot, or Ant's going to get the ball. And it was jump ball. So I guess they split it right there. But then to the jump ball goes loose, and Ant just, I don't know, like Sonic the Hedgehog's like his way. Do you remember that? Like he like got down low, and all of a sudden he comes up with the ball, and he's going the other way. Hit a head pass to Mike Conley for the 3. Like, there's one stat in that whole 45-second thing. I mean, it's a jump ball and an assist. Like, that's it. And that won the game. I mean, to me, that set the tone for the overtime, which, if I'm being honest, like once it got to OT, I was kind of like, you know, if I'm betting on this, I'm probably betting the more experienced, more mature team, right? And to the Wolves' credit, like, they don't look, not just in that game, but night to night, like the significantly less experienced team or the significantly younger and immature team. And, you know, when they are that, Ant usually plays a big role in that. And when they aren't that, Ant plays just, you know, an even bigger role. I just, very impressive, very fun to watch. And I mean, 76 more games to go. How can you just not be excited about where Anthony Edwards is taking this team?
I know I got my petty shot in at the top about the Chris Finch stuff, but I don't know if you have the clip, but you were in the locker room post-game when they were talking about, like, how are you doing this? Or like, how are you taking this other leap? And Ant credited a lot of his success right now to just his offseason and Team USA. But there was also a really funny part of those quotes where he was like, and Finchy kept making me come back to Minnesota and like playing. I think you asked him, right, about like situational basketball.
Yeah, I don't have the clip, but I was just what struck me in overtime. You know, I don't remember, somebody from Boston like got to the line, and this is like, you know, a minute or two left in overtime, and Ant's been going again for 13 minutes with 5 fouls, and he's like huffing and puffing some, but like the understandable huffing and puffing, you know, like he's been running back and forth the whole time. Well, 12 months ago, he was out of shape. You know, I mean, that's a fact. He told us that. So that's what I was kind of asking him. I'm like, well, I felt like a lot of that performance you just had in the fourth quarter and overtime had to do with like physically the way you are right now compared to a season ago. And that did lead to an interesting answer of something I didn't know what was happening, or I didn't know this happened this summer, but I asked some people about it last night after Ant mentioned this, like they were just simulating in the summer, simulating situations like last night for Ant. You know, down by 5, you're getting doubled. You know, what are we doing? They ran these 5-on-5 game simulations which makes sense. That's what Ant, you know, as a young player needed to learn and grow in. And he just was like, that did a world of good for me. I had a great summer. That stuff with Finch back in Minnesota. And then obviously, in addition to FIBA, the kid's on another level because he just had the best summer of his life. And he's in as good of shape as he's ever been, which is absolutely necessary to be able to play it a fourth quarter and overtime the way he did, right?
Remember when his knee used to like burp and then he would call out right away? Like, remember those days when like his knee would have like a little thing and he'd be like calling out for subs, but then he wouldn't sub, or like he would be hands on his knees in the second quarter? No, just back to the Finch thing. I know that after that Atlanta Hawks game, again, it was just so bad. And I think you and I both said that last year was probably Finch's maybe worst year of coaching since he joined the team. But I just keep coming back to, man, especially talking to other people around the team, that just that relationship, you got to give some credit to Finch on just, and last night was a good example of Ant going out of his way to kind of bring up these situations that none of us know, right? Like there is, just because Dane does 5 pods a week, like there is a lot of stuff that we don't still know.
Absolutely.
and some of that is like Finch calling Ant back from wherever he is across the country in the summer, be like, hey, we're going to put you in July. We're going to put you in moments that are going to translate into November and January and March. So I thought that was really cool. But there was another cool moment in that game, and this maybe can segue into Jaden and just the foundation of this team, but I don't have the exact like timestamp. But there was a moment in the second quarter, I think, and credit to Jim Pete, by the way, he was kind of all over this. Jaden started the game 1 for 9, and it was really like hurting my feelings and embarrassing because they were leaving him wide open as if like what you would do to like the football players when you play pickup basketball, where it's like, yeah, that guy can't shoot, just like make him shoot. So Jaden was 1 for 9. Ant gets the ball, drives to the middle, kicks it to Jaden in the corner, and Jaden hits his 3. Celtics call timeout right away. and Ant just runs over to him and starts just giving him a big pep talk. And from there, Jaden went on to shoot 6 of 8 after that, including 12 points in the fourth quarter and overtime. But that moment right there, and then all the stuff he said post game to Katie Storm or in the locker room, like that was leadership 101. That was him being like, I know my guy, the cornerstone of this team that came into the league with me in 2020, like he's having a really bad night, but he's still busting his ass on defense. He's maybe the best defender in the league or one of, and I need to continue to trust him. And after the game, Ann even said, like, well, when I'm playing bad, they still trust me and give me the ball. I got to do the same thing for Jaden. So I thought that moment was to build up one of your teammates. For all the other stuff that this team has going on or has traditionally had going on in the past, that was just a really, really big moment for a kid who's 22 to be like, hey, I'm going to continue to pass you. But that's hard to do, man. Yeah. It's hard when a guy is not shooting well to be like, hey, I probably could just do this myself and I'm going to trust him. And Jaden was obviously great defensively. I think he only had 3 fouls, which is pretty crazy when you consider he played 45 minutes. And
against Tatum and Brown.
Against Tatum and Brown. But he also, again, those 20 points. I know there's a really cool podcast earlier today with Adam Mares and Tim Legler. And Legler was going just off about how, like, Jaden is so good defensively. And coming in, I don't know if it was like the Washington thing or whatever, but like a lot of people thought maybe he was like Matisse Thybulle. But the difference between Thybulle and Jaden is that Jaden can then give you 20. And they needed those 20 points last night. He was second in the team in scoring, hit 4 for 9 threes, including, like I said, I think 3 of them were in the fourth quarter and overtime. So I just thought that was a really cool moment to highlight because Ant's doing all this other stuff, right? He's got 38, he's got 9 boards, he's got 7 assists, but he's also like not solely focused on himself. He's solely focused on trying to elevate all those people around him. It's what he does on home games, right? Elevating the fans, getting them, entertaining them. So that was a really cool moment that they don't win that game without Jaden offensively, which is not something we've said a lot, right?
Right. I want to get into the Jaden element of this game because you point to the shot making that he had in the fourth quarter and overtime, but it was really symptomatic of what I thought was really interesting, the way that Boston decided to match up against the Wolves. So we'll take a quick break here, and then I want to get into that. I want to let you guys know that Falling Knife Brewing Company has all the Wolves games on their TV, sound on in there. I got to imagine that's been a fun environment thus far this season. You can go on Wednesday night against New Orleans if you are not going to Target Center for this game, or they play Wemby in San Antonio on Friday night. This is, to me at least, like the type of like Wolves season that is meant to be shared. I always would make the joke about, Wolves fandom was always like done in the dark in your basement when you're like your wife and kids were like up, going to sleep, and you're there watching by yourself. Like this is now something to like not be ashamed about, and I think you could do with other people. So at least locally, Falling Knife is I think a great option for that, kind of the Wolves bar in Minneapolis. So put that on your radar for Wednesday, Friday this week as the Wolves continue to play. And then we do have a chance for you guys to go to the game on Wednesday against New Orleans. We're going to be trying to do this throughout the season, giving away a pair of tickets to about half of the Wolves home games this season. We want to do it to people, or give those to people who have been supporting the pod for a while now through our Patreon. Obviously, we fund the show largely with advertising and those sort of things, but having kind of that baseline of just subscribers who want to contribute to the work that we do. So if you are a Patreon subscriber, patreon.com/DaneMooreNBA, just shoot us a message that you are available for Wednesday against the Pelicans, and then we will randomly pick someone to get 2 tickets lower level. Again, Target Center has been a blast this year. That just for me sitting there, it's been so much more lively than so many of the other games I've covered at Target Center. So there's a link for the Patreon if you want to get in the mix there. Send us a message so we know that you're available. Patreon.com/DaneMooreNBA. Kyle, I thought this game, like right away from the jump, first possession, was extremely interesting. In I'm weird and I always write down like what the matchups are, and I also kind of like try to guess how the opposing team is going to match up with the Wolves. But before the game starts, I feel like that's like particularly interesting now with the the double big look and how they're going. I would not have guessed that they were going to put Jaden McDaniel or put Kristaps Porzingis on Jaden McDaniels and have Drew Holiday guard Karl Anthony Towns. And frankly, I think that was a good move by Missoula. I think it kind of flummoxed the Wolves early, but they eventually sort of settled in to what that looked like and stopped trying to play matchup basketball. I asked Finch about that after the game. Here's what Finch had to say. Chris, you mentioned them not guarding Jaden honestly in that sort of way. What just overall the way they kind of matched up with you guys? What did you need to do against that?
I mean, it's you can't play mismatched basketball against that type of defense. I mean, they just come out. They got great length. They got really good defenders. Their switchability is a problem. Whenever we did move the ball and we just kind of made the easy play in front of us, like they still got to come out and they still got to guard. And I think it's mentally challenging sometimes because you think you want to take on all these like matchups and overcomplicate the game, but the reality is like those things will reveal themselves if you just kind of play within the flow a little bit more. There were more opportunities. I probably should have gotten the ball to Cat down the stretch there in the post with Holiday was on him, and maybe we could have gotten something calmed down and good at the rim there. But in general, we made enough of the right plays, but it was really all about our defense.
And again, I mean, we'll talk about the defense a little bit too, because I do agree with the thing that shifted this game was, or made the Wolves be competitive in this game, was the defense. But you do got to score a little bit, and that's where this team is less than, right? Kyle, they are as good of a defensive team as they are. They're below average offensively thus far, and part of that is they're still navigating. How Karl's navigating how to find his buckets playing with Rudy next to the basket. Jaden all of a sudden kind of comes out and he's dared to be the offensive engine for the team to start the game because Porzingis wasn't guarding him. I think he started 1 of 6 in like the first 6 minutes of the game. But again, they sort of settled into it. Come the fourth quarter and overtime, I think the 5 guys that were on the floor, Jaden and Ant in particular, understood what Boston was trying to take away or dare them to do. And they maximized it, right? With Jaden hitting a couple of skip pass threes from Ant. And then Jaden, I think that got him some confidence, right? He sees those go down. Then he kind of gets to the mid-range. He's taking Porzingis off the dribble to be able to score. Then I think Jaden was 5 of 6 from the field in the fourth quarter and overtime. I do just we'll focus on this game, but this is for me, something I'm going to be tracking throughout the season, particularly when you are a good team. You are going to be scouted harder and more intimately. And it's kind of the example I've been using is 2 years ago when they would put the small on Cat and then they bring the double. And that really kind of stuck the Wolves in the mud for a couple months, right? They couldn't figure that out. This is going to be the defensive dynamic that they face when they're on offense. And they're going to need to navigate that over the course of the season because teams are going to try and muck this up. They're going to try and throw something weird at you and make you figure it out on the fly. And quite frankly, they're going to need to figure it out a little bit quicker than I think they did last night. But credit to, I think, the 2 young guys on the team for being the ones who really figured this out last night in Ant and Jaden and the way those 2 played off each other.
I'm unapologetically just pro Jaden. I just kind of love him and everything he does. I just was looking this up on the fly. I think last night was his career high for field goal attempts, 18, which, that's probably not that surprising, right? He didn't ever take, I think, more than 10 in his rookie season. But again, to go back to, he started 1 for 9, and then to finish from that point I brought up in the second quarter to then go 7 for 9 the rest of the way. This is, I don't even know how to form thoughts, but it's this ties into that contract extension, right? Where it's okay, man, we're paying you a lot of money moving forward now, not just to be a really good defender. I mean, he didn't really do anything else in the box score last night, 2 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal. But there are going to be nights when if Karl's going to give you an absolute dud of 7 points on 3 or 10 shooting, you need Jaden, if he's making $27 million starting next season, to score. And for him to be able to give them two ways of not only defense, again, like you were talking about, like Finch was talking about, but just giving him big points. And it was big threes too, right? Like one in the corner, but it was also like these little mid-range things where the shot clock's running down. It was on the left side, and he just had to kind of go and give him a bucket. Yeah. So I was just really happy for him because you could see it, and Jim Pete was calling it out all night. But when he was 1 for 9, man, he looked like he was on an island, and he's like, I'm not fouling, right? Like I'm doing everything that everyone wants me to, but I can't get the ball to go through the basket, and you can't sit him in those situations like you might a lesser player that's not hitting shots.
Yeah, to guard Tatum. Yeah.
Right. So just, I don't know. I know it's all about Ant last night, and it should be all about Ant, but if you can, I don't know if Jaden's going to ever average 20 points a game, maybe as this team and the timelines and all that stuff develops and we move forward. But he showed you last night that remember at media day when he's like, yeah, I know I can score a lot of points. Like if I was, I can be a first option on a lot of teams. Last night showed you that it actually came pretty easy to him to be able to give you production on both ends of the court, and they needed it because without him, it would have been probably just a really big Ant game that results in another sad Timberwolves loss.
And do you remember this was kind of out of nowhere, but I remember Atlanta doing this to him last year where they put Trae Young on him. You remember that? And they put the game plan together. They were like, okay, looking at the 5 starters here, like this is the one we're going to dare to go. And Jaden in that game, if I'm remembering correctly, he had like 8-10 points in the first 6 minutes of that game, like all on Trae Young. And again, like teams are going to do this where they're going to pick and dare 1 or 2 players on the Wolves to be the ones that beat them. And like you said, or the 2 people in this one were Kat and Jaden. And Kat did not have it. And that was very apparent early on that was the holiday matchup was not going to be one he was going to be able to take advantage of. So if that is, there's no way you win that game if you get nothing offensively from Kat and Jaden. I don't care how good, your defense is. It took Jaden a few quarters to be able to get there having defense all along the way. But yeah, you say it's all about Ant. Like I just felt that Jaden was an extension of Ant last night because it was his shot making, but it was also the defense that allowed Ant to not need to be guarding Tatum or Brown, And Ant, if you don't have Jaden McDaniels in that game, Ant is forced into his primary matchup being Brown or Tatum. And I think it's very likely that he fouls out of that game and you miss the whole fourth quarter and overtime of it. So there's I don't think there's any underselling what Jaden was able to do.
And obviously, like the Ant defensive highlights were incredible, the bulldog mentality, but a lot of that stuff did come at the end of the game when he was just running on pure adrenaline.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I don't know if Ant's ever going to be able to just be like. I don't think Ant can defend like at that for 4 quarters, right? It's just almost impossible to be that good offensively and also that good defensively.
Sure.
But to have Jaden kind of, essentially Ant would be like your closer, right, on defense, and that's what he was last night, not only on offense too, but if Jaden can just kind of get you 7.5, 8 good innings playing defense, and then in certain situations, end of shot clock, end of game stuff, you can have Ant out there too. It was reminiscent, even though last night it was really just Ant and Tatum down the stretch and in overtime. But it just gave you flashbacks to that Dallas Mavericks game last year, right? When Ant and Jaden just didn't let Kyrie and Luka even get really a shot off.
Right.
And that's what this is all built around. And to your point about Kat too, like if and when this team decides to pivot or is forced financially to make a move, you look up and down that box score, Naz Reid's always going to be able to get you a bunch of points. But I've always said this team still lacks some shooting, some scoring.
That's
and
real.
if you decide that you've had enough of Carl and you just want to send him out for pennies, you're not. If you go get, and we'll talk about this later, but like if you get the James Harden package, which is just a bunch of guys who have a pulse, you need Jaden to start scoring more points. And last night in a big game that he's also known for his defense, for him to be able to get you points after the rough start he had, after being guarded like he was a bum from the 3-point line, and every time he made a 3, by the way, in that second half, they got to mic him up. And I don't know if we got to pay like dark web fees, but every time he hit a shot, he looked at someone. I don't know if it was Sam Cassell on the Celtics bench, but that man was just saying a lot of stuff that I don't think we can repeat on this pod. So he was great. I thought Ant did a great job of pumping his tires there in the first half. And it was, again, more and more times where the 2020 draft class, RIP to Leandro Balmero, but they've changed the culture of this team, and they've given fans and people watching this organization like real hope. I mean, they kind of saved the franchise, and they're interlocked, signed for the next 4 or 5 years. So cool performance last night from two kids that are not even Tatum and Brown are always the comp, right? That's another reason last night was so cool. It's always like, oh, can Ant and Jaden ever beat Tatum and Brown? Well, Tatum and Brown have like 4 years on them. And for those guys to do what they did last night, and they're not even in their prime yet, was a pretty cool experience.
I want to move over to talking about the defense here, because I want to talk about Rudy and the defense, and then also get to Cap before we wrap up. But I want to just start this by playing this Rudy quote from the locker room after the game on the defense, and because I feel it is so important where Rudy's at mentally to the success of this defensive team. And I'm just seeing a confident Rudy Gobert defensively, and here he talks about why he's confident.
I feel like maybe the fewest straight line drives you're seeing coming at you, like in your career?
Probably. I mean, the guys have been outstanding. Just taking the challenge of staying in front of their man, and and obviously it makes everything easier for all of us. And then when they do get beat, obviously I'm there for them.
Where is kind of this team at compared to a year ago in terms of just toughness and mindset on the defensive end of the court to go out and guard as hard as you guys do for?
I think it's really we understood this year that it's what's going to help us be a great team. We have a lot of talent. We have a lot of guys that can do a lot of amazing things on the court. But if we don't hold each other accountable and hold ourselves accountable on those things, we know that we're never going to be able to maximize our potential. So from day one, training camp, we sat together and we decided that we wanted to be a defensive team. And I'm really proud of the way, the maturity that we've shown, and the approach that we have, and the way we take every possession personally. I think that's the mark of great defensive team. It's got to start here, and then it's fun. And offensively, we know that we have a lot of talent. So we share the ball and we stay aggressive, and I still think we're a really, really good offensive team. But defensive end is who we are.
So I was thinking about that, Kyle. That's just an awesome quote. I really like that. But you think about this meeting, right? They sit down and decide that we need to be a defensive team. That in itself is a huge article of faith in Rudy Gobert, right? And from Anthony Edwards, who saw Rudy struggle last year, all those guys in the locker room, I mean, it's the same group largely as last year, and Rudy didn't give you a ton to have faith in on the floor for when he was playing last season. So for them to choose that while having maybe some reasonable skepticism of what Rudy could or could not do, one, that's huge. And then secondly, Rudy then needs to deliver. Like, if you are going to be a defensive team, like, yeah, you got Jaden and you got some other like good bit defenders and Nikhil and Ant sometimes and that, but I don't know, you like kind of remove Rudy from this thing. And this is not a defensive team, that a team that you would hang its hat on defense. Rudy, to be that identity that they decided they wanted to be, Rudy Gobert had to again become Utah Rudy. And 6 games in, I mean, he's been that and more. I just found that a fascinating bit of faith, and then also, credit to Rudy for delivering.
I've always said that you are the smartest basketball person I know, and I always come to you for things. But I just want to give you the opportunity here on your own podcast. Do you want to just admit now that he wasn't healthy last year? Because there's just that, again, we haven't talked in a week, but that 3 that he blocked at the end of the first half the other night, I just, it's kind of weird, and I know we're going to close here with Carl, but Rudy Gobert gives me hope for Carl in a way, and I can explain later, but he was so
I'm not even going to get to defend that take, or no?
No, he was just so bad last year, and it was, the calling
his
for the ball.
confidence was bad. That's what I said. I'm not. I didn't say he was nicked up from Eurobasket. I didn't take away from that. He wasn't. But the entire season, Rudy Gobert
was injured or not healthy. But I
at the
digress.
beginning of the season, I agree with that. At the end of the season, think about the Denver series. Did Rudy Gobert not look physically 100% in the Denver series?
Yes.
You don't think he looked 100%?
No, I do think he looked 100%.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. And so why they became.
Just let me have this.
No, I'm just saying what I said over and over again was the problem with Rudy Gobert and why you guys were saying he didn't look athletic was because he didn't have faith in the guys around him to be able to go and confidently go defend the rim because he didn't trust that Jalen Noel or Bryn Forbes was going to come and backfill behind him and chip the big. He never had that the entire time. So he found himself in no man's land over and over again. If you watch Rudy in Utah, he was bad sometimes there too when they had no perimeter defenders and he didn't trust himself. And that's how he gets hung up in between. And that's how he gets dunked on. That's what happened in the Jaylen Brown play. He didn't know if he could, because it was semi-transition, if he could come over and commit to that. So he's a half second late and then Jaylen Brown puts it on his head. He needs to confidently be able to trust how and where the team is rotating around him, or if they're stopping the ball at the point of attack, or at least presenting some resistance. He can't fix it all himself. Nobody can. He needs to have a little bit of help and a little bit of confidence in the fact that he has that help. And then he can be the defensive player of the year, which I think he has that help this year, and he's looking like the defensive player of the year.
I love it. Good. That was a good argument. I will say that if I go to the gym today and I can't put up 225 on the bench, I'm not going to blame it on my health. I'm going to blame it on a lack of trust for my wife and my friends around me. I think Rudy, one of the cool things about him is that not only physically have I think won that argument that he looks different than last year, but also too, I just don't see the bad teammate stuff. And we're going to get into the energy vampire here in a second, but you just don't see him making his teammates look bad on the court. And that was something that when he was at his peak in Utah, I know there's a lot of other stuff that goes into Rudy Gobert and him, darkness retreats and some of the other stuff he does. But from a teammate standpoint, it seems like he's always been a really good professional teammate. And I think last year that was not the case. He did a video with Shams that was posted today that I'm sure they recorded a couple months ago, but he kind of talked about that as well, just letting the fans and the cost of acquiring Rudy kind of get into his head and stuff. He just looks like a guy who comes to work now, and he doesn't show up his teammates. They're not really he's just kind of getting his offensively now on lobs or putbacks. It's not a lot of, I will say too, and I don't know how much you can dig into this. This would be more of a Brit pod, but his passing has been awesome. He gets the ball now and he makes these passes out where it's like he kind of collapses the defense and then kicks it out. So just overall, I mean, for what this fan base, this organization had to go through the last 12, 14 months about the Rudy Gobert trade and how it gets brought up in Kevin Durant trades and James Harden trades and stuff. He's the best defensive player in the league right now, anchoring the best defense in the league. And at some point, you got to shut the fuck up and eat some crow. It's a real thing. You can still say that they paid a little too much for the house, but damn, that house is really nice right now. And it's somewhere that maybe you want to retire and have your kids and your grandkids. He is so good. And it was crazy last night to watch Jason Tatum, who probably comes into last night 5 games into the season as MVP leader or second behind Jokic. Tatum would get into the lane and not even try to challenge Gobert. And one other thing that I had in my notes that I want to say, there was that first quarter, I think, moment where Jaylen Brown absolutely yammed on Rudy. Mm-hmm. I love that he tried it. I just love that he was like, I'm going to, those are the real defensive players I love, are the guys I don't care if I get posterized. I'm going to try to protect the rim here. And he got dunked on. But after that, man, there wasn't a lot of other guys trying to go to the rim, trying to get up in his face. So teams just don't even attack him anymore. It's not even they're shooting, 30% in the paint. They're not even trying. And he has been a revelation. He might be the team's second best player right now. He looks spry. He looks like all the things we thought they were going to get last summer when they acquired him. So it is cool, too. I've always just wanted to ask you this on the record. But I don't know, you kind of grow up or you play basketball and stuff. You're always just pick up basketball, right? Offense up and down and stuff. I think it's really cool that this team is we want to be good at defense. Yeah. I think being a defensive team is way more cool and way more fun because anyone can score in this league. Simmons and Russell always talk about how half the league can average 20 points a game. but can you really like shut the other team down? That's when you really have something that's sustainable. I was so tired of the Wolves trying to outscore teams in the past, trying to score 140. This team might never score north of 110, but 65 games, they might not let their opponent score north of 100. So that is another reason why, if you're like, oh, is it the same old Wolves? Have I been through this again? Am I going to get cheated on again for the 35th year? They are actually building something defensively that is sustainable and is starting to like show up more and more by the best players in the league not even doing what they're good at, attacking the rim, getting into the mid-range, because they're just so nervous about the length and size of guys like Rudy and guys like Jaden.
No, I think it's a great point. I think it's a fun thing to like. I think for all of us, even if we played basketball, like learning NBA defense is kind of fun. Like
Yeah.
and like understand like because it's not something we were ever asked to do, right? Like some of the technicalities of this, and I think because basketball is so like pick and roll centric now, like you can kind of just watching live like pick up on some reads and some coverages and like understand like what the Wolves are trying to do. I love that. I remember like back the first Tibbs year and like understanding what, you know, it's like 10 years ago, but like what ice pick and roll coverage was and what you're trying to get to and what the Wolves weren't able to do, like how they weren't able to execute that. Or we talk about like the high wall during the Pat Bev year and like understanding what that's trying to take away, what maybe that leaves open. And I think like that stuff's kind of like nerdy and in the weeds, but it's okay because offense is still going to happen. Like they're still going to get the ball, right? And there's, even if they're a defensive team and a mediocre offense, there's still going to be these explosions of what Ant was able to do last night, or a game where Carl makes 7 threes, or Conley, Rudy pick and roll lob dunks. Like they can be a defensive team and still be like a really fun team because the flashball plays are still going to happen. You have Anthony Edwards on your team, you know, like that's, yeah, it's going to be an exciting team to watch night to night, whatever level of like focus you want to have on it.
I just think immature teams can score a lot of points. I mean,
Yeah, right.
I've watched a couple Wizards games, right? Like, I think immature teams, I think these guys are so much more athletic than they were 20, 30 years ago, not to get into the JJ Redick Plumbers debate, but I think these guys are just all so fast and quick and strong that anyone can score, but I think immature teams can score a lot of points. Mm-hmm. I think mature teams can play defense. I don't really think you can be an immature team that is really good defensively, and that has been, of all the things we've focused on for the last couple of years of you and I covering the team, but just being fans my whole life, it's never really been, since Kevin Garnett left, a mature team, mature franchise, mature organization. And to be the best defense in the league and to never let go of the rope last night against the best team in the East, that's maturity, that's growth, that's trust, that's everything from Finch all the way down. So, yeah, I find myself tuning in just because I want to watch Rudy Gobert play basketball, and that's crazy.
Yeah, right.
That is like,
That's
I found
not how you
myself
felt a
last
year
year
ago.
tuning in and be like, oh, I guess I'll eat this meal, but I'll have the Rudy Gobert mushrooms on the side. Like now, I'm a fan of mushrooms, and it's great.
Let's flip over to talking about Karl Anthony Towns. I don't know. I mean, we've been talking about this. I mean, it's been pretty much 6 bad games now in 6 games for him. Obviously, Britt was hot on that last week, kind of recapping the first week. I don't know. I've talked about it on and off. I got some thoughts on this game in particular. What I've been saying is I'm just trying to focus on what I'm seeing on the floor and hold that to account because I know I can, like many other people, get, I think, swept away in some of the other stuff that Karl does, and frankly, maybe get blinded by that because it's not maybe what you want your star player doing, like aesthetically. I'm trying to focus on the basketball, but you and I haven't really talked, or you haven't been on the pod in over a week now, and it's kind of getting worse here. He's kind of almost feeling like a not very relevant piece, which is crazy to say for a 4-2 team. Honestly, I think it helped that he fouled out last night, just in the vacuum of that game, and being able to bring Kyle in there to just kind of play mature, under control basketball. But it's tough. This is not This is not a fun thing. I don't think it's a fun thing for Carl that he's struggling right now. But man, I'm just seeing him fighting himself, and I'm not sure he knows that that's what he's doing, and that's really getting in the way. What are you seeing?
Karl Anthony Towns, is this year 8 or 9?
9.
Karl Anthony Towns is off to his worst start of his career by a mile. And of all the players on this team, deserves the most criticism. It's not even close. My thing that I struggle with is last night when I sent that video clip and that tweet about Ant and Jaden in leadership, sent it right after the game. Within seconds, there's like 12 replies just shitting on Cat. And I'll just never understand. If that is how you consume sports after one of the most impressive wins and this kid goes off and he's two-way and Jaden has a 20-point game and all that stuff, if your first thought after 30 seconds of winning that game is to shit on Carl, we'll just never have a beer together. We'll never be friends. This team finally is doing some things. And this isn't being like, well, you can't criticize Carl. No, you can criticize Carl. I just don't understand. Like, I lose things. I lose things all the time. I lose things all the time. On my wedding day, I lost my belt in the ocean. I jumped into my suit. Okay, so when we finally got off the boat, and we're back on land, I was like, I just got married on a boat at sunset in Hawaii. And if the first thing I did was like, God damn it, I lost my belt, I'm a loser. I'm a big loser. Like, I got married. The Wolves had a ceremony last night. This is clearly Ant's team. There's a lot. I mean, the Carl stuff is coming down to the point where I think it's just all mental. And I'm not even making excuses. It's just like, I don't think he has confidence in his shot. He did let, 7 rip last night. I thought they all looked like good shots. They were kind of from that Porzingis range, which is pretty unguardable. He just didn't hit any of them. They have to figure it out. But this kind of goes back to the Finch thing. No smart team, only dumb people fire Chris Finch last week. Dumb people fire Chris Finch. He's now coaching the best defense in the league, and his star player's like, yeah, he made me work hard in the summer. You can't just trade Carl for the James Harden package of just a bunch of guys with, 1.5 legs and a heartbeat. Because this team also doesn't have any space on their roster to go get 4, I've seen people like, yeah, just go trade them for 4 or 5 bench players. They don't have 4 or 5 bench spots. This is the deepest team in the league. But they got to figure it out. And I sympathize for him because I'm probably a little too loyal and just all the things I think he did in the past to kind of keep this team afloat. But they got to figure it out because I don't mind. I kind of have a fun stat for you here. So last night, here I'm going to read some. Karl Anthony Towns has scored less than 10 points in 17 career NBA games. The Timberwolves are 4-13 in those games, and last night was only the second time they've won such a game since Cat's rookie season. Okay, so this team has never been able to win games when Cat scores under 10. Now they can do it because he's not their best player. He might not even be their second best player or most important player. He might not even be their third most important player. But I just think you need to try to go through every possible solution or every possible thing to figure it out. I'm talking sports psychologist, one-on-one with A-Rod, whatever we got to do to figure it out, because I still think at the end of the day, if you just dump them and just get rid of them, I have some Wiggins flashbacks of just is there anything else this team can do to try to correct his behavior? And the behavior is the worst thing, right? The energy vampire stuff of she never shows up as teammates really, but just constantly showing up officials. Or just
I have a pushback on that one. That's what I noticed last night, and why I knew it was bad was so first possession of the game, Jaden tries to dunk up Porzingis, he gets blocked, right? They're doing the funky matchup thing. Wolves don't know what the hell they're doing, right? They're like, okay, we weren't expecting this. What Drew Holiday's on Cat. We weren't planning on playing through the post to Cat, but next possession down, they gave it to Cat in the post, and Holiday's on him. Porzingis lurks over, right, kind of for the double team, which so Cat's kind of this is his first touch guarded by a point guard with a lurking center on him in the game, and Holiday just kind of goes behind him and takes the ball away, goes out in transition, Jaylen Brown dunk. And what bothered me was not that Carl didn't run back on defense, because quite frankly, I don't expect him to at this point. He doesn't do it. So
right. Yeah.
But it wasn't because it wasn't a foul. Holiday just took the ball.
Yep.
But Carl felt the need in that moment to try to divert blame. What he normally does in those times is look to the referee, right? And, I got fouled. What's going on? And that's what makes him still back on defense. What he did on that play was he looked at Jaden and he blamed Jaden for not having cut.
Okay.
And that is not just bad basketball, that's bad leadership.
Yep. Red flag. Massive. I did not see that. So
because I'm normally with you that he's not like a show up his teammates guy. It's the refs are the ones he tries to show up. That to me signaled he's down bad right now. I don't think, again, that is not a pattern of his behavior. That getting back in transition and the ref stuff, that is. That was relatively new to me, and immediately I went to the clip on my computer and I tweeted it out and whatever. But that can't happen.
Nope.
I mean, if you're doing that sort of stuff on top of falling over and on top of the refs and all this other stuff, we are getting to a point where you will need to be benched. There are other options. Kyle Anderson, and a lot of that has to do with Kyle Anderson's just like a pretty damn good option to put in at the 4. It's safe, right? You want to up your risk potential and get a little more upside. You can put Nas in there, right?
Yep.
And do that. They are just at a point, given how much you can kind of bank on Kyle and what Nas is showcasing, that frankly, they don't need him right now. Now, that said, they better get him going, or he better get going, because if they do, what if you got Carl in that game last night making 7 threes, which is completely within the realm of possibilities for him, for sure 5. You do that, and now you have blown out Boston. So again, all these critiques are, I mean, it's bad. I'm calling it out, but it is pointing to do something different, and the ceiling gets higher, and you get better. You want to talk about people are talking about it's Denver and Minnesota in the West right now. It's not if Carl doesn't get going. I'm sorry. It's just a really good team. It does not have that ceiling without at least getting rid of the negative elements of what Carl is right now. It can get there if you get the better to best versions of Cat. And right, what I wrote down in my notes was he's fighting himself, and I don't think he knows that he's doing that. That's concerning. Go ahead.
But okay, the words I am saying, you are not interpreting them as me necessarily defending him or trying to skirt criticism. I'm telling you
No. I was just saying the teammates thing.
I know, but I'm just saying there's a handful of people that listen to this that have the critical thinking skills of a pet rock, and I just want them to know that he deserves. We do pie chart of blame over at Flagrant House. He deserves right now the most blame. But it's, to me, and this is the struggle. This is why it's a conversation, but it's not as easy, again, as just sending Finch to the moon after one blown 20-point loss. The talent versus all the other stuff. I don't think, again, if you just go look at the box score and you just take Carl out, even though he only had 7 points and 7 turnovers and 6 fouls, I come back to, if you take Carl off this team, and some people are going to be so happy, and you send him to the Charlotte Hornets, I don't think this team is nearly as talented as the 5 best teams in the league.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's why it's I don't know, dude, my wife, she loves to just get rid of stuff. She's like the opposite of a hoarder. She just loves to get rid of stuff. And I'm always just probably too loyal, but it's hey man, we can't just get rid of all the frying pans, because at some point we're going to host Thanksgiving and we got to have that pan. So you can't just cut bait with him today because you're frustrated. That's why I wanted to say that stat. It's this team now can just win games without him. And now you can flip that and be well, if you can win games without him, why do you need him? Because I still think at the end of the day,
can't win a championship.
You can't win a championship without as much talent as you can have. But to your other point, because you also tweeted this out last night when you're this team's got to find a way to get Naz Reid 30 minutes. The best way to do that is to just play him over Carl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw a bunch of people reply to that. Just being honest, that's not what I was getting at.
Right.
I mean, I'm at the point of Nas appears to be completely fine guarding wings.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm saying. It went from a joke of playing, Nas next to Carl and Rudy. I don't think it is. Knock on wood, Jaden gets hurt or something. I mean, I think you probably start Kyle Anderson at the 3, but I'm playing Nas 12 minutes a night at small forward in that situation, because he subbed out with 7 minutes left to go in the game last night. And I went to Britt and I'm like, I think he's done for the night. And Britt's like, no way. He didn't come back into this game. He sat out the final 7 minutes of the fourth, and he sat out all of overtime. And, we get dangerously close to overhyping Nas some too. I actually don't really think he needed to play in those times. Like, I would have put Kyle in once Cat fouled out. I get that. But when we're talking about like innings eater, 82 games for the season, yeah, like I do think you got to get Nas closer to 30 minutes a night. And I think it's two ways you can do that, is what I guess I'm saying, is you could play him a little bit more over Carl. You got to navigate some politics in that, but like whatever, you're a good team, you're trying to win right now. Carl's not playing well, but I'd play him as a wing, because I kind of just see Nas as a wing now.
Again, this conversation would be a lot different had they not won the game, because Carl had as many points as turnovers and as many fouls as the two best defensive players on the team, Rudy and Jaden. I just keep coming back to, none of this is easy. The season is way too long. And I just think again, we did this all summer, right? Like the second apron stuff, all the big financial decisions that are looming. I mean, God forbid, we haven't really even, since the season started, talked about how I think we've now learned that Naz Reid is like a foundational piece of this team, along with Jaden and Ant. Kyle Anderson has to retire a Timberwolf. He's just too important, right? So there will come a time, if you're anti-Carl, you just had enough of him after 9 years and not correcting some of the things mentally, the energy vampire, the showing up to teammates. That stuff I totally get. And the example you brought up last night is really telling, and like another sign that I think this man is so in his head and so down bad that they got to do. I don't think the talent has fallen off. I don't think this is a Monstar situation. But you can't have that. You can't have that, because that's why we hated Rudy last year. And if he's going to start doing that, that's why people are going to hate him. But I just keep coming back to, I love this team. I love that they can play defense. I love how many options they have and how deep they are. I wonder if you asked Mike Malone or Steve Kerr, other teams around the league that are considered contenders, and you said, hey, would you rather play the Timberwolves with Karl-Anthony Towns or without him?
Yeah, right.
They would probably say we'd rather play him without him, right? So they got to figure it out, and this is going to be an ongoing conversation, and he was really close last night to submarining what I think was probably the best win of Chris Finch's tenure, but I just am not ready yet to pull the plug, because without him, there's not a lot of other good options. And
the pulling the plug is like, that's a whole separate conversation. and not one I really want to get into today, or like in general, because you and I, like, opening up the trade machine and trying to figure out what they can get from the Knicks is, one, premature, because they are, if they do trade Carl, it wouldn't be till February. And two, it's the D'Lo theory that Conley had last season, where D'Lo did not have trade value at the beginning, before the season started last year, or 15 games into the season. D'Lo started playing better, not in a way that necessarily like massively impacted the Wolves positively, but it made other teams like the Lakers be able to believe that they were interested in wanting D'Lo. So if we even want to play the hypothetical like Cat game, he needs to play at a level that an opposing team is willing to be able to trade something of value, perhaps significant value, for him. And that's not going to come right now, because one, he's not playing well, and two, because he's set to make $50 to $60 million a year for the next 4 seasons after this one. The responses of just trade Cat are absolutely lacking nuance, and like you said, just nowhere near the type of real thoughts and way of thinking that NBA coaches or NBA executives are doing.
Tim Legler said on the All NBA pod earlier today with Adam Mares that he watched that. It was one of the most fun games he's ever watched last night, Celtics Timberwolves, and that he watched every second of that game, and at no point did he even notice Karl-Anthony Towns. That is a really big indictment. Yeah. If you start being, if you wake up the next morning and remember Carl as Tony Snell, right? Just like, I guess he was out there. I don't know. That's really, really embarrassing. And then I'm glad that you brought that point up in the first minute of the game, kind of showing up Jaden, because that's the type of stuff that for all the, I mean, I think you would agree with me here, but for all the other stuff, I don't think historically in those first 8 seasons, Carl showed up refs all the time and had so many dumb offensive fouls. I don't remember him ever really showing up his teammates. I feel like he's always been at least,
because I genuinely don't think he's that guy. That's
right.
That's what I'm saying.
And that is the inflection point for me, and I think a lot of people listening to this, of like, that is a sign that this man is down really bad. And I hope the coaching staff or other people can kind of get through to him. But back to the Rudy stuff. This is why I tried to say it again at 20 minutes ago, that Rudy gives me hope for Carl. Rudy was doing some of that stuff last year, and whether it was health or whether it was comfortability with his new teammates or whatever, he was just not acting like himself. And he has limitations as well, but he was showing up the teammates, and that was always the thing. I'm a big chemistry and vibes and teamwork guy, and when you start showing up your teammates, you're a loser. And Rudy was a loser last year showing up his teammates, and now he does none of that stuff, and he's beloved. If you're going to start showing up your teammates and you're Carl, that's loser mentality, and he's got to get that corrected, because that's the one thing that can absolutely, I mean, they'll just leave him, right? Like you said, bench him. Like, the rest of this team seems so connected that they'll just move on and just leave him at the bus stop and move forward, even if it means that their team has less of a chance to win a championship. So
I don't think they want to, man. I think they want, obviously, I know they don't want to. They want to find a way to make it work. I think to the Rudy point, what made Rudy work? You started using him, like Britt said this on the last week, like a sublime role player. How about we start there with Carl? And how about we put him in the damn corner and let him start off somewhere simple where his talent alone can start to develop him some confidence? Because you know what is just not going to work this year? He is never, ever, ever this season going to be able to drive to the basket in the way in which he was 2 seasons ago
when you
before
compared him
Rudy
to
Gobert
Giannis,
got here.
in a light way.
It was.
Yeah.
He started playing offensively like Giannis. That was his game. He was pump and go against fives, and he was attacking the rim, and he was a problem. It was the best season for my money of Cat's career, because he's also playing defense. That's not there, because until Rudy can move out to the corner out there, which who knows about that, on the Carl's drives take up so much space. They just naturally do. He is wild and gangly and good at that. But if there is a player, if Rudy Gobert is in the dunker spot, then so is a center. And it is not going to work. And it is going to lead to stray voltage. It is going to lead to falling over. It is going to lead to transition opportunities. And it sucks. It's the energy vampire of himself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he needs to start somewhere where he can confidently get going. Let's turn down the roll. Let's not placate to it. Let's just ask him to do some basic things and stack them on top of that. Treat him like a sublime role player, just like you did Rudy Gobert, and I bet you'll find the same result.
But to close this out on Carl, what you just said about Rudy and kind of unlocking him or repositioning him or just bringing him back to life out of his midlife crisis, that was a lot of coaching, right? But it was also on Rudy to just stop being a loser of a teammate. Stop fighting your teammates on, in the huddle. So put Carl in spots where he can start to build and have more consecutive good moments and good games and good weeks. But the mentality, the stuff publicly, the actions, I cited this 36 different times, but I always think back to a couple years ago after the Bucks won the title. The Wolves were playing them in like game 3, and Carl had a couple bad games to start and was getting ridiculed, and he just put his head down and played basketball. Just played basketball, and then after the game was like, I'm just here to play basketball. Like, he was like really mature. You got to get to the maturity. And that's why I'm saying I'm not defending Carl fully. I'm not defending anyone. It's just the coaches need to find a way to unlock him again and get some of that. I mean, he's still so skilled, but the mentality, the down bad to get myself out of this, that's all on him. It's all on him. And this is an inflection point. This is a year for make or break, because if it breaks and he submarines the team or he submarines himself as a player, he's out. It's just going to happen. And we're going to talk about that all April, May, June, July, and August. But for now, I just think you got to continue to find different ways to rekindle that flame, because this team last night, as good as they are, I still think we just talked about this at the beginning. There's so many things they can do better.
Yeah.
There's so many ways, to get, I mean, they're not even playing Shake Milton anymore, right? Like they're basically down to an 8-man rotation. They got to find these little ways to get all these different people better in the rotations. Carl playing better basketball makes this team even more dangerous and puts them in a true contender status. So it's going to be interesting. But we're also 6 games in. So, I don't know. It's November 7th.
I appreciate you playing hurt today.
Hey, can I just say quick that I thought Nikhil was awesome last night? I want to just get that out of the way. He stumbled through the first 5 games with his shot too, but he had a couple big shots last night. He's kind of pesky, but I just wanted to give him a shout out too because I thought he was awesome.
Yeah, like his energy. No more technical free throws.
Yeah, what the fuck, man? What is going on?
I don't know. I don't know.
They got to I don't know if you said, well, yeah, you were at the game. They that one woman who was shooting for the free TVs, she made her free throw. So, like, maybe she should take him over now. She also made a 3-pointer, so maybe she should take him over Carl. But that, and then another thing I had written down, it was just funny, but in that end-of-game sequence, we really didn't talk about enough, but, like, Joe Mazzulla was never calling a timeout. It was so crazy. It reminded me of, like, a heavyweight boxing match where you're just like, I'm puking into my toilet. I'm just like, oh, call a timeout, Joe, call a timeout. Like, it just kept going. Ant hit a big 3, ran back down court. Him and Kyle did their whole 30-second montage of a handshake
while they were in transition.
The play didn't stop.
I know.
And then Kyle's like kind of slaps Ant on the butt, like, "Hey, you gotta play defense."
Yeah.
So then Ant gets a stop, goes down again, hits another 3, and then
dap.
comes back down. 30-second montage of a dap. And none of the plays stopped. It was like one of the funniest moments ever. Just like these guys had a full-on dance party while the game was still going on, and it was hilarious to watch. So
it was.
Wolves back.
Vibes are high. He's Kyle Tiggy. I follow him on Twitter at Kyle Tiggy. You guys are doing Flagrant House today too?
Yeah, I'm oversaturating the podcast market. But
there you go. That's all right. Hey, no, man, this is the time. I'm going to too. Me and Jace are going to do Wednesday morning or tomorrow morning. So I guess we'll talk a little bit more about this game. Maybe some just themes from the first 6 Pelicans on Wednesday night, and then Britt and I will go on Thursday afternoon. So no such thing as oversaturation.
What a crazy string of games, right? Like the Nuggets, and then like the Jazz who have the Walker Kessler angle and stuff. Then the Celtics, and now Zion on Wednesday, and then Wemby on Friday, and then 2 games against the Warriors. I think you're heading out to San Francisco for that. Just purely from a basketball standpoint, as much as I've just ridiculed Adam Silver and his love for tight underwear, like the regular season games right now are really good, and every night is awesome. Last night was awesome across the entire league. So if you can find ways to watch the game, I know that's still kind of a double-edged sword, but if you can still find ways to watch the NBA or the Timberwolves, I think you should, because it's about as pure a basketball cocaine as it gets right now. It's just really good basketball, high-level execution, and a lot of fun to watch for November.
No, man, it's going to be a blast, and we got like 6 more months of it, 5 more months. Yeah, well, we'll see.
That makes me sad.
No, it's sad, but also exciting. Again, appreciate you doing it, Kyle. Like I said, Jason and I on Wednesday morning, we'll keep rolling with this thing. Until then, he's Kyle. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah.